Is Tesco doing enough to fight the ongoing issue of the deforestation of the Amazon forest?
I think they're not. I don't think any big corporation that puts so much pollution out into our world is doing enough. It's not acceptable that they simply say they're going to reduce plastic or they're going to like change their packaging. It's not enough. They need to physically have aid teams going out there. They need to be educating not just the people, the government. Like there are so many different facets that they need to be getting into to sort this out. Not just Tesco's, but all big corporations need to be making a difference to stop this horrific deforestation.
Do you think Tesco's promise to boycott Brazilian produce will turn into a real action?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because this is really clearly a crisis. The Amazon rainforest is a crisis for biodiversity, for indigenous people. It's been going on for a long time, and economic selfishness has privileged the local economy or the regional economy over people and nature. And I think the way to kind of look at this is that the governments have been very lax, very slow at actually doing anything that makes a difference. They've said stuff. There are international protocols, and there's UN saying things, and NGOs saying things, and governments occasionally saying things, but really they haven't made much of an impact. And Brazil has been able to continue either through direct action or just by not intervening to prevent the spread of livestock farming and mining into the forest. So actually, it's quite interesting that that a food company in the UK has taken this kind of step forward. In a sense, we as consumers of foods, largely, I think that's the kind of the main sector we're talking about here, can influence practices on the ground by our choices, but it's quite a big responsibility to put on us, saying it's down to you to make those kind of choices when we've got big institutions like governments and UN agencies and now food companies. So if they can intervene to help, I think that is quite a good step forward, actually. So I'm quite kind of encouraged by that, because it may then have kind of knock-on effects to other companies, maybe to consumers themselves.
Last week, UK was accused of dumping the UK's rubbish into Turkey. Do you think there is a link between this ongoing scandal and the fact that Tesco made a commitment to boycott the Brazilian produce?
Yeah, definitely. It's all about marketing. I definitely think that Tesco's have seen it. They've seen the government get into a bit of trouble and they're thinking, oh dear, I'm like to blame, and I don't want to look so silly now that people have realised I'm causing people to have medical issues and actually die from this. So I'm going to make a big song and dance about like distancing myself. And I think, to be fair, especially our generation, a lot of people are going to look at this and think, oh, that's a bit sus, a bit dodgy, and look further into the actual amount of waste and pollution that Tesco's as a company puts out. Where's that going? Have they actually made a difference, or are they just saying they have for some campaign scheme?
Well, yeah, I think that there's a bit of a gap very often, and perhaps even more so with certain governments, from what they say and what they do.
Would you say there is a high level of awareness among British people nowadays about what is happening with the Amazon forest?
I think there is, actually. I mean, people were worrying about rainforest forest kind of losses in the 1970s and 80s. It led to a lot of the kind of emergence of sustainable development being an issue. The 1987 Brundtland report, led by Gro Harlem Brundtland, was the sort of first time that sustainable development was kind of put on the map. and I was involved in the secretariat on that in 1987. People were very worried about the losses of habitats and how that linked to poverty and how that linked to the affluence of richer countries. And now we're talking, 34 years later, and the amount of rainforest that's been lost is greatly extended. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has gone from 350, a safe place, in 1990 to 415 parts per million, a non-safe space. So the changes since then have been kind of utterly alarming. So we have known these things for a long time, but I think you're right. It's correct to argue that I think more people are aware and more people are concerned and want to take some kind of responsible action. I give quite a lot of talks about the climate crisis, and the question that people ask a lot, I mean, this would be to community groups, not kind of scientific experts, but people in the country, and people say, what can I do? I want to do something. What should I do to help, to kind of offset these kind of apparently distant problems?
Yeah, so some last year there were many people that complained about this, about the fact that Tesco is not doing enough to just be sustainable. And what Greenpeace found and is claiming that Tesco tried to divert the attention from that to the fact that they are reaching zero emissions and they are putting their targets. What do you think about that?
I think as a worldwide corporation, it's one of the biggest employers in the world because it's affiliated with the US company Walmart. And there is no way that they're producing zero emissions when they're producing this much waste. They're such a big company, they earn so much money, they can literally fake this stuff. And there's like, they're just trying to cover it up as a business plan. No.
How do you feel about the Amazon forest?
Well, a half of the species of the world are in rainforests. I haven't been in Brazilian rainforest, but I've been in Guatemala and Honduras. I've worked in the rainforest there. They are cathedrals. They are the magnificent habitats, completely breathtaking places. And the diversity, the range of kind of not just species, but kind of interactions that we don't understand, that we've only begun to understand. It's similar to deliberately burning down the cathedrals and mosques and temples of this world. That's what's happening. We're doing that to feed a habit around largely livestock and meat when it comes to this specific problem. I mean, there are other things that are driving rainforest loss in other places. So I think it's dreadful. I think it's absolutely right to call it out as a major international problem. And if it were to continue, the rainforests are a source of water. Plants produce moisture through transpiration. They produce oxygen for the planet. They suck up carbon dioxide. They have intrinsic value in what they are, and we should celebrate them more, because the more we celebrate, perhaps the more we care, and therefore the more we would avoid the kind of behaviors that cause the problem.
Like the Amazon rainforest produces so much of our worldwide oxygen. If we get rid of it, we all die. Not just South America. Every single person will suffer from all of that forest being cut down. Not just oxygen, but it is such a big ecosystem within our planet that if we don't protect it worldwide, then everyone will suffer, not just the locals living there and not just the people that are living off like the products it produces. Everyone suffers.
So what solution do you see to this ongoing issue?
Well, I think that there are there isn't a simple solution. I mean, I think there's kind of multiple actions, and maybe that's kind of part of the problem, is that if we had one simple thing that we could do, we could line up behind it. But it's putting pressure on suppliers of produce. It is on our behaviors and consumption choices. It's putting pressures on governments to act. They usually don't want to, because they've got other sorts of things that they want to do, you know, establish trade deals with countries because they think that's more important than looking after the environment, for example. So I think social action is a critical part of this, combined with good scientific evidence, so that, you know, when action is being taken, it's on the basis of good evidence and research and understanding.
One of my friends, a human rights student, told me that there are some committees, some international committees that got more into environmental law, and they might put more pressure on governments to cut down on all that's happening, because governments won't do that themselves because of they don't want to affect their economy. So what do you think about that? Is that going to happen?
Yeah, I think it can happen, and it is, in a sense, kind of happening already in certain places where people have taken responsibility and said, we are going to take action sooner and quicker. And to a certain extent, there becomes a kind of a rolling effect. So if a group of lawyers or legally trained institutions begin to take action over to prevent something bad happening in one place, that can have a kind of a roll-on effect elsewhere, where people say, that's interesting, perhaps we should do this over here at the same time. And you do get these kind of ripple effects. And if we go back to the kind of climate crisis example, the bringing forward of the targets for net zero has been very revealing, because only a year ago, most governments were talking about 2050, which is too late. We need to have reduced emissions by a half by 2030, and that's kind of scary because it's only 8.5 years away. But since in the past year, those targets have come towards us, where some governments are now talking about 2030, and you're getting some companies beginning to do that. And if you look at the crisis that the oil company Shell has been through just in the last 2 weeks, you know, big pension companies have put pressure on them and have kicked out their plans for reducing emissions, and told them to be stronger. And you know, that's kind of tough when you're a company that sells oil. They've got to get rid of oil because oil is not for the future. So they need to go through this kind of reinvention period to do something kind of completely different. But the pressure is very strong on them. So you look at that story and you think, oh, that's quite good. Actually, I can see that that's kind of beginning to work. So I think we can kind of look at some of that with confidence, and every little action, you know, kind of a legal action in one place can have this ripple effect elsewhere, which is quite encouraging.